So last video I talked about whether or not the people of Hawkins could defeat Pennywise had he made a road trip to Indiana. Watch it after this video. Or before, I don't care, just watch it. But what if we flip the script? Can the Losers Club and the people of Derry defeat the Demogorgon? 3 out of my last 4 videos have been fanfics. I might just start posting on Wattpad. Both stories follow a similar formula. Both have a group of losers that defeat a big, bad, demon monster thing with the help of the supernatural. But both, in a way, were helped by their circumstances. The Demogorgon was defeated by 11, and the losers were guided by a super space turtle god who was essentially the antithesis to Pennywise. So despite the fact that Pennywise is without a doubt the overall more powerful and dangerous of the two, he can be warded off and even defeated by the powers that be, those being a huge turtle that barfed up the universe. The Demogorgon is much more animalistic with no capacity for cruelty and without, say, a direct connection to the hive mind it's part of, would have to be dealt with differently than Pennywise. So let's set the stage. The two stories take place in different states here in the US. Stranger Things takes place in Hawkins, Indiana, while it takes place in Derry, Maine. Close-ish, but not exactly walking distance. Both stories are kinda tied to their settings. The Upside Down mirrors the entire town of Hawkins, while Derry and its people are affected by Pennywise and its influence even during its 27-year nap. So assumptions have to be made here. 11 accidentally created the Upside Down when she touched the Demogorgon in 1983, linking Earth to the Abyss where the Demogorgon, Demobats, and Mindflayer reside. The problem there is that there is no Upside Down for Derry. So let's say that for whatever reason, Vecna really wanted Georgie specifically, which doesn't super make sense because character motivations and whatnot, but this is just a silly video to leave on while you eat or go to sleep, so don't think about it too hard. Vecna in turn makes another Upside Down, this time of Derry from the Abyss to Earth. But even if you did do that, it could make an Upside Down version of the Abyss instead of Derry, but whatever. And to keep Hawkins pretty much out of the equation entirely, let's assume that for one reason or another, 11 never escaped the lab. And in the same vein, Pennywise will be in the middle of his 27-year resting period, so his role will be kept to a minimum in this scenario. So this is completely focused on Derry being terrorized by a single Demogorgon. No dancing clowns or secret government agencies to worry about on top of that. We'll start with the Losers Club and their feats. Just like Pennywise, there is a bit of a difference between their versions in the books and the movies. In the book, they're a bit younger, late elementary school age, while in the movies, they're about mid-middle school age. But the biggest difference are the abilities they gain throughout the book, as well as their tie to Maturin, the aforementioned space turtle god and the creator of the main Stephen King universe. Maturin's presence is heavily implied throughout the movie's canon, but there isn't a scene anywhere like the book where he speaks directly to the losers, since that happens in the book's finale, which is much different than either of the movies. His power manifests in different ways throughout the book. He doesn't flat out give superpowers to the losers, but they do begin to feel the presence of others, whether it be that of the other losers, Henry Bowers, or Pennywise himself. When Eddie Corcoran died in the book, all 7 of them looked up as if they heard a distant cry, but obviously didn't know what it was they felt at the time. By the end of the book, they're basically able to read each other's minds. Maturin and possibly the other, or Gunn, who's essentially the god of the Stephen King multiverse, literally puppeteer the actions of the losers, since throughout the story, they're pushed to do things they wouldn't otherwise do, and they wonder how many of their actions are their own, giving them a sort of aura that other people feel as a sort of overwhelming presence. Like when Eddie was in the hospital and his mom felt it and had to leave. They also have low-level foresight, anticipating the actions of other people and Pennywise, or even knowing something is about to happen, like when they prepared for a rock fight while Mike Hanlon was being chased even before they were officially friends with Mike, and not even knowing that he was being chased by Henry Bowers and his friends. The group doesn't have much for physical feats, since again they're middle schoolers at best. As a whole, they weren't deterred by serious injuries like Ben getting slashed by Pennywise, or Eddie breaking his arm, so they'd likely keep it pushing even if one gets injured in this scenario. Bill Denbrough is the leader of the group, being the bravest, and everyone more or less listens to him and his ideas, and has access to his dad's gun. He also seems to be relatively smart, creating a replica of Derry's sewer system to find out where Georgie went. Beverly Marsh is the best shot and was able to blast a hole in Pennywise's face with a slingshot. Stan Uris is described as neat and sharp. Mike Hanlon is the most physically capable. Eddie Kaspbrak is basically a walking map. Richie Tozier is funny, I guess. And Ben, even as a kid, was a genius architect, with no schooling or research since it all came from him naturally. He made a dam that flooded the entire Barrens, built a fort underground, and made silver bearings after melting down some silver dollars, which Beverly used to shoot Pennywise. They don't have telekinesis or the ability to see other people from across the planet, but they aren't completely out of their depth here. But how do they stack up against the Demogorgon? The Demogorgon in season 1 almost feels like an entirely different creature when compared to the ones later in the show. But we can chalk this up to a difference in both budget and the show's creative direction, since it kinda became MCU-ified and less horror-centric around the 3rd or 4th season. The season 1 demo was more Michael Myers stalker slasher as opposed to the ones in later seasons who were more Jason Voorhees bloodbath slashers. What I'm trying to say is that the Demogorgon we see in season 1 and that we'll be using for this what if should be relative to the other ones in the show and capable of the exact same feats, even if said feats weren't shown. They stand at around 10 feet tall with increased strength, being able to ragdoll men no issue, as well as knock steel doors down as demodogs. Increased speed as we saw them catch up to a truck, putting their movement speed at 45 miles an hour at least, with the attack potency to burst through walls and slice through metal and people. They're also insanely durable, no-selling entire barrages of bullets with absolutely no problem. Pistols, assault rifles, shotguns, all of them are completely ineffective, but they do have a weakness to fire. If my memory serves me right, no Demogorgon has been killed by fire alone, but it does weaken them physically. Specifically, their durability, meaning they can now be hurt by more conventional means like bullets. They also seem to be less resistant to piercing damage in general. Steve Harrington was able to hurt it with a spiked baseball bat, and Karen Wheeler stabbed it up pretty good with a broken wine bottle. This one's a bum though, like why is he just letting it happen? And their mouths are less durable than the rest of their bodies. As for special abilities, they can create portals to and from the Upside Down. The first one was more Freddy Krueger with it, but later on they just burst in and out of these things at will. They're connected to a sort of hive mind which, if severed, every demo on Earth just dies. Straight up. But considering the fact that the Mother Gate is in Hawkins and it took 11's power to close it, this isn't an option for the losers in this scenario. Demogorgons seem to always know where their target is from the Upside Down, making escaping and hiding extremely difficult. But their relative position is given away by lights, so lights on Earth will flicker corresponding to wherever they are in the Upside Down. Again, they're essentially just animals. They can sense blood from across dimensions, which they're attracted to, as we saw in season 1 when the Demogorgon captured and ate Barb after she bled a few drops into Steve's pool. Will, while connected to Vecna and the hive mind as a whole, stated that he could think what they were thinking, confirming that they do think. And we saw with Dart in season 2 that they can have a sense of individuality. I wouldn't say they're exactly smart, but they can obviously strategize even if it's sorta instinctual, so I'd say they're about as smart as a dog or a wolf. That more or less covers the feats and abilities of our two sides, but one last thing that's worth mentioning is the setting. Derry isn't an average town. When Pennywise landed in Derry millions of years ago, it made the town in its own image. It's said to be as if the soil it was built on gave life to evil. Pennywise can directly manipulate people into committing evil acts, but again, he won't be awake during the scenario. But even then, people here are naturally just worse. Derry is said to have by far the highest crime rate out of any town its size. And despite all of this and the absolute insanity that goes on in town, like lynching, mass murders, and other things I probably can't mention on YouTube, there's absolutely no press, no news, no one seems to care that it happens for the most part. Basically what I'm saying is, a 10-foot tall faceless man monster snatching kids and eating people is par for the course in Derry, and the losers will be getting little to no help here. So how would this play out? We set up the scenario earlier where Vecna made a second Upside Down with Derry and sent a Demogorgon after Georgie instead of Will and Hawkins. It starts out similar to its original story. Bill makes a paper boat for Georgie on a rainy day which he goes out and plays with. Georgie loses it when the rain picks up and sends the boat into a storm drain. Because of how hard it was raining, no one else was out at the time. In this alternate universe where a clown doesn't pop back out with his boat, Georgie may have stayed by the storm drain for a second or gone back home. Regardless, the fact that the streets of Derry are virtually empty at this time means that the Demogorgon should easily be able to snatch him up. Even if there does happen to be someone around in earshot, they likely wouldn't pay much mind, similar to what we see in the original timeline. Georgie gets scooped up and placed into the weird upside down incubation chamber. A main difference after this point is the fact that Georgie alone was taken by the Demogorgon, and since Pennywise is still sleeping, there isn't a large number of kids going missing the way we see in It. So Georgie going missing is an outlier here, aside from the possibility of the demo snatching and eating another person who happened to be bleeding off on their own. Bill would still be adamant that Georgie was alive, and this time he'd be right, but his parents would remain just as closed off and shut down as we see in the movies. Pretty much the exact opposite of Joyce Byers, who did everything she could to get Will back. Even Bill's friends believe that Georgie's gone, even if they won't say it. We know that lights on Earth turn on when someone is in the same spot in the Upside Down. We also know that there can be a bit of communication via phones, so Bill would know Georgie is somewhere out there. At the beginning of it, Bill, Richie, Eddie, and Stan are already friends, but we're missing 3 of the others at this point. It's possible that they wouldn't be friends here without Pennywise, but for the sake of the video, let's say that they are. Henry Bowers and his pals still terrorize the losers. Henry tries carving his name into Ben's stomach before he kicks him off and falls into the Barrens. We know the Demogorgon's attracted to blood, and to keep it in line with the movie, it could corner Patrick Hockstetter since he went off on his own. The season 1 Demogorgon isn't as bloodthirsty as later ones. A lore accurate reason could just be the difference in commands that they had from Vecna and the Mindflayer. We see some tear through military soldiers or prisoners in a gulag, but the first let Nancy go with just a scare, so the losers who were already in the Barrens could see a glimpse of the man without a face. This would reinforce Bill's idea that someone snatched Georgie, which out of the kindness of their hearts, they help Bill. Beverly wouldn't see much change. She's there in time to help the losers at the pharmacy and she joins the group. Where this side story can continue is with Mike. He helps his grandpa, Leroy Hanlon, as a sheep farmer. As we established, Demogorgons act a lot like predatory animals, so it's likely it would be attracted to this place where they butcher sheep. Hunting and preying on sheep at night, Leroy would then come out to kill the creature with whatever gun he owns, possibly warding it off and seeing it retreat into its portal. Mike could witness this impossibly large humanoid creature and share it with the other losers after introducing himself to them after the whole Henry Bowers rock fight. And let's say that because they were all bloodied up after the fight, the Demogorgon came and ate Henry, Belch, and Victor. Okay, so boom. All 7 losers are together and know about the Demogorgon, with the plan to kill it and save Georgie from the Upside Down. A lot of the losers like Richie and Ben are avid comic book readers, and would likely surmise that the Demogorgon has to have a weakness the way that they came to the conclusion that Pennywise's werewolf form was weak to silver. The portals that Demogorgons create don't last long, so finding a portal that it's come from would be near impossible unless they get lucky or lure it out. Nancy and Jonathan were a bit more hardcore with this idea and used their own blood to lure the demo into the Byers house. The losers wouldn't have to do that and could maybe slash one of the sheep so the Demogorgon comes back. Exactly how they prepare for the demo is complete speculation. Guns are an obvious choice since Mike may have access to a rifle or shotgun or more, while Bill can get his dad's pistol. But after that, it's up in the air. If we lean into the whole Maturin is guiding the losers thing, then they'd without a doubt use fire some way. Gasoline and a match should be an easy way to utilize fire. And as we've seen in the show multiple times, fire weakens the Demogorgon's body enough for it to be pierced by bullets, although it was still able to power through multiple shots from an AK-47 without much issue. Ben has the ability to create dams strong enough to flood rivers or underground forts by leading the rest of the losers, so actively preparing for a Demogorgon could be a real way to beat it, similar to how they beat down and tagged the Demogorgon in season 5. With all 7 of them, careful planning, fire, and weapons, I think they could do the Demogorgon real good without much issue, but I don't think they can kill it. Even while trapped, Demogorgons have been able to reliably escape through portals into the Upside Down. We saw Bill in chapter 1 follow Pennywise into the hole in the Neibolt house, and came to the conclusion that the sewers is where Pennywise resided. A similar conclusion would be made here, guessing that the Demogorgon, and by extension Georgie, is in the mirrored version of Derry. The final confrontation would obviously be in the Upside Down. They established that the demo is weak to fire and can be hurt by normal weapons now, but in this new setting, they probably wouldn't be able to set up some kind of trap for it. We do know that fireworks are particularly effective against creatures from the Upside Down, as we saw against the fleshy Mindflayer, and the losers do pack some M80 firecrackers in their arsenal in the books. Again, the losers in the book gain a supernatural awareness as the story goes, meaning I don't think they'd be easily picked off by a stalking Demogorgon, nor would they have a problem finding Georgie with the help of Eddie and his navigation skills, and of course Bill's connection to his brother that would likely lead them to where he was being kept. The thing is, even with fire and guns, they simply don't have the manpower to take this guy out completely. Out of every single Demogorgon that we've seen in Stranger Things, only one was killed by a normal person, and even then it was Hopper, probably the most physically capable character in the show, and only after it was completely torched by a flamethrower. Small armies with automatic weapons and armored vehicles couldn't stop them. It took Eleven using all of her power to atomize or banish the demo that we're using in this scenario, and Will killed the Demogorgons in season 5 with his superpowers that he gets from Vecna, one of the show's big bads. So 7 middle schoolers might not cut it. I doubt their tie to Maturin would give them any direct power that they can use on the Demogorgon, some helpful advice at best, and even though they were able to scare it off in this hypothetical scenario, because they're after Georgie and that would directly interfere with Vecna's plan, retreat would simply not be an option for the Demogorgon. The Ritual of Chud would be an insta-win condition since the Demogorgon and someone else's mind would be out in the cosmos, leaving their frozen bodies in the Upside Down. But my takeaway from that scene in the books is that the ritual started after Pennywise hit Bill with the deadlights, and wasn't something any of the losers can pull out on any random person whenever they feel like it. The losers did get down and dirty against Pennywise in the movie, but believing in themselves gave them power and weakened Pennywise, which isn't an option here. Eddie and Stan are the weakest links here and unfortunately aren't gonna make it out alive. Do I think there's a possibility that they win? Maybe. Makeshift flamethrowers, gunshot wounds, explosive gasoline tanks, Beverly firing M80s into the demo's mouth, and the use of fireworks could possibly kill the Demogorgon, but it's just way too fast and is more than capable of one-shotting grown soldiers while in a weakened state. In high-stakes situations, the losers were guided by Maturin or God himself, like when Beverly locked in and popped Pennywolf, despite missing her previous shot out of fear. So something similar could happen in the situation where they get a perfect firework shot into the Demogorgon's mouth and make it explode or something. So all in all, do I think the losers can defeat the Demogorgon? Huge maybe. It depends on the help that they get from above and how applicable that is to this situation. I give them a solid 50-50 shot, but it's certainly not without at least 2 casualties out of the group. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.